you've been making this video on how to get someone out of your league. So this was kind of in my head, and this talks about how increasingly women are, and they cite some studies, but I'm less interested in that, and because I do feel like I see it anecdotally, are less content with the partners that they are finding themselves with, and therefore are staying single later and later into life. So, and the suggestion is that there's messaging to women that says, don't settle, which is all like great stuff. Don't settle, you know your worth, all these kinds of things.
I actually disagree with that premise. Do you want me to hop in now or wait till the end?
I don't think
that's why people are being single for longer. I actually think that a woman could date a guy at 22 and then be like, oh, I'm not going to settle down, and then date that person's exact clone just in a different body at 28 and settle down. And I think it's because life expectancies are longer. I think because men are doing the same thing, and I don't know who started it. And I think because marriage and kids, the date has been pushed back. And so you're just going, well, if I'm going to have kids at 30, then there's not a huge pressure to get married at 22. So unless I think that I'm just really, this is the best person I could possibly find for myself, why wouldn't I just go back out into the world and have fun if I'm going to end up in an identical relationship with someone else later in life?
Well, the argument that they're making is, men, whatever, biologically, culturally, are more likely to want to date the 22-year-old in many cases than that 28-year-old. So what they're saying is that, okay, that 22-year-old meets a guy that she likes a lot, but doesn't need to do anything because she's 22, so she doesn't need to settle down. She's going to wait till she's 28. Maybe she's going to wait till she's 29. At 29, she is not as attractive to that same guy as she might have been at 22. So therefore, she no longer has the top pick over the span of her lifetime. And that's sort of what they're talking about, is that, I'll put it this way.
I wonder if that's true, though. Or I wonder, because let's say you're 22 and you're dating a 25-year-old. I wonder if the 29-year-old just doesn't end up dating a 36-year-old.
A 36-year-old man.
Yeah, who's like the same level of attractiveness and success and intelligence and humor.
Maybe. Well, I guess I'll put it up. Let's frame it a different way. If you are a woman, the scope of men, and this isn't actually how it works, but if you could imagine like the least desirable guy, generally speaking, though it's not going to be 100% agreed upon over here, the most desirable man in the world is whatever, Henry Cavill or something. He's over here. The range of men that you could potentially sleep with goes really high up this way. Like the amount of those men that would be willing to spend a night with you if they met you out at a bar is up to here. But the range of those men that would be willing to date you exclusively monogamously does not go as high up. It is a smaller section of that.
Yeah, which is just a way of saying that which is a way of saying men will sleep with someone that they aren't interested in dating.
Yes, exactly.
I agree with that.
And so their argument and what they're saying is that women are increasingly, because of the tendency towards hookup culture and Tinder, they have experiences with men, one night, two nights, whatever, that are super high, quote unquote, agreed upon high value men that a lot of people want, that are tougher to pin down because they have a ton of options. And they are less satisfied.
Who they were unable to, if they wanted to date them at 22, they could not date them.
Probably would have been, would have been too hard. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a guy that will sleep with them but would never date them, regardless of their age or station in life.
Speaking,
okay.
Yes. And that those experiences create dissatisfaction with the person that you wind up with later in life. And I don't know if this is true.
Yeah, I don't know.
I thought that it was interesting. I thought it was an interesting suggestion that having an experience of, and again, this all assumes that there's roughly a linear spectrum, having an experience of sleeping with someone or being with someone makes you less satisfied with the type of person that you actually can wind up with.
I don't know about that. That would seem to have a couple of assumptions in it, which is that that person is still thinking about that they could get a person like that who they were never able to get in the first place. And that therefore they're like married to someone but longing for someone that they never dated. Like, this isn't even an ex-boyfriend. This is just a one-night stand guy.
And I have no way of knowing if this is generally true. I don't know enough people in this situation to even speak on it well anecdotally, but I did think that the philosophical model of like, look, this is what you're capable of experiencing in a short term. This is what you're capable of getting in a long-term experience, and that is a smaller frame.
That is not my understanding of what leads to a lot of divorces, especially in the cheating department. I feel like what leads to a lot of divorces is sleeping with someone who happens to be in your orbit. The tennis coach, your child's friend's parent. You know what I mean? Your maid or employee or boss. Like, I feel like a lot of the affairs aren't hunting down the one night stand that you had, or even pining for that person and trying to get somebody who's similar to them. I feel like most of the affairs are who is just in my life a lot, and I don't have a lot of options, but this person is one of them because I'm forced into proximity with them. And that's most of the affairs that I can think of.
Sure. And that might be how it's acted. It's also that some of the dissatisfaction inherent in the relationship might be of a comparison to an idea. I do think it's fair to say
but I'm saying then they don't, it's like, it would seem weird. I guess if you're dissatisfied with your husband, this is like a literal example from my life. And then someone's wife ends up hooking up with the tennis instructor. Like, he's not Henry Cavill. He's just the guy that you pay to teach tennis to your kids, but he just happens to be around all the time while your husband's at work.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? It feels more like a thing of convenience and proximity than it does an attempt to mirror a hookup that woman had at age 22.
Well, perhaps it's not an attempt to mirror that, but it is an expression of the general dissatisfaction with this felt with, like, the husband, I could do better. There's this general feeling of like, this isn't as good as it gets. And again, I don't know if any of this is true. I thought it was an interesting suggestion.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because divorce rates are up, but also back in the day, you could just hit your wife and cheat on her and not get divorced. So I actually don't know if dissatisfaction, like, basically the premise of this is dissatisfaction now that the dating age has been pushed back is higher now than it was in 1920. But I don't know about that. I don't know if that's, if you just horribly dissatisfied and divorces now. And you can work. And so back in the day, you have the same, it's not because you hooked up with someone at a younger age. You started dating your high school sweetheart and you married them. You were miserable the whole time. But if you say anything, he's going to beat you. If you sleep with him, he's going to divorce you and you're destitute. And so you're just miserable, but you stay married. Yeah. I'm not convinced that the divorce rate is increasing because dissatisfaction is increasing.
Yeah. There was a stat that they rolled out that I was like, this doesn't prove what it seems to be implied to prove here, which is that one of the biggest predictors of extramarital affairs is premarital sex, basically, which is to say, like, if you have more sex early in your life before marriage, you are more likely to have an affair. But that's also like, also correlated with being non-religious.
That's what I'm saying. So like they're positing that the more sexual you are pre-marriage, the more sexual you are post-marriage. And they're not taking into account the fact that if you don't have sex before marriage, you're deeply religious, which means that you think if you cheat, you're going to go to hell.
Yes.
So it's not the fact that the sex was had. It's the fact that you don't have this overarching fear.
And I find that to be a much more plausible explanation, or at least to account for a lot of that particular.
Yeah. And again, that doesn't mean that religious marriages are happier. It just means that they stay together because they're afraid of going to hell.
Well, this was
they might be miserable together.
So this was an interesting thing that I think is being talked about a lot when people discuss marriage. So one of the things that they are, I believe, correctly pointing out is that with advances in technology, with women having more control over their finances, being more active in the workplace, they do not need a partner in the same way that they did. And so
if you can't work, you need somebody to provide for you while you do something else to make them feel like this is a good deal.
Yes. And for society, having a bunch of non-nuclear families and a section of men at the end of society that will not be able to get partners because the women that are available are sort of sharing and taking turns with the men that have lots of options, and they're happy to do that because they don't feel like they need a boyfriend or a husband, and they pay for their own stuff and they'll date casually. That might not be the best for society.
Sure.
But I'm also not convinced that there's like what's to be done about it. It seems it's interesting. Like there's this. It has been the case, I think, throughout all of human history that because of the material conditions of the earth, men and women were better off together, and like the nuclear family was a really good solution to the difficulties of harvesting and having kids.
So was the extremely close-knit tribe.
Yes.
Which has also gone away.
And so this is, I'm going like, are we entering a phase where the things that have always put men and women at odds, that men are technically, from a biological and evolutionary standpoint, better off spreading their seed, and women are better off consolidating on one person that has a ton of resources to take care of them. And that has always been something that has moved them in different directions, but has been reined in by environmental constraints. Now that those environmental constraints are being lifted, it's like, what is the new average or standard way that people who are fairly affluent are going to carry on, conduct or not conduct relationships with one another?
Well, I also think I'm subconsciously guilty of what I'm about to say, but the idea that divorce is failure and staying married is success is also a very bad scorecard. And I do this, and that's how you view things.
If what you care about is the happiness of the people in the relationship and not the stability
if you're
of
solving
society.
For happiness and you find out someone got divorced, it's like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. It should be, oh, congrats. You've clearly been miserable for some period of time, and now you're free of that relationship that was making you completely miserable. And that's not how I view it subconsciously. That's not my instinct when I hear about it. And I think the same thing happens with a lot of people. So, you hear this and you go, oh man, this is tragic. Divorce rates are up. You go, oh, maybe the exact same amount of marriages are miserable as always were, but now people can get out of them.
Can exit them.
And maybe lifelong relationships are hard and people have always just had a 45% success rate at it, but
they dealt with each other
because that was the only option. Well, I'm just going to be miserable and make your life miserable, and we'll fight and it'll be awful, and then we'll die.
Yeah.
So, and now you don't have to do that. So I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Yes. It's kind of like, now that we, men and women writ large, need one another less because of technological advancements and the ability to get a lot of what relationship brought to you via apps on your phone and
and that's not just Tinder, by the way. That's also like you can order food, you can order massage, you can order a dog walk.
Yeah.
No matter which gender you are, you can
doctor
make good
on
money.
demand. I'm sick. I need someone to take care of me. Like all of these things you can outsource them. I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do, but it is lifting the pressure to have one person that is there with you till death do you part through happiness. And
I also wonder, did they mention if the desire to have kids has gone down?
I don't know. I didn't hear it. I'm not certain.
I'd be curious about that. Because I wonder, that's obviously a big part of partnering up and having a life partner, is having kids and wanting to raise them in a two-parent household, which a lot of people, that's a goal for them if they're going to have kids. And if you don't want kids, I could see that also releasing some pressure around.
Well, that's a big thing, is when you add the equation of kids and the stability of an upbringing for them, it's definitely not good for them to be in a home with a mom who hates dad and vice versa. But it's like, you want to try harder to make things, to make things work when there are children present, to give them the best upbringing and chance that they have. And when you remove that, and if you get more people that are not having kids, don't want to have kids, what do we have to stay together? Do we need each other? Can we not have these weird new arrangements?
Is that a contributing factor where people don't want to have kids, and so then they go, well, I don't need to stress about this so much. I can kind of just date as it's fun.
And if you have fewer women that, I don't know that this is the case, that want to have kids, the biological clock, which is still like, yes, your dating potential is going to be largest in your younger years when you're considered more attractive, but like, you no longer have this actually finite resource of eggs.
I think as soon as they figure out how to make it so that having kids is as easy at 22 and 32 and 42, you'll see the dating and marriage and having kids age get pushed back even further.
You're really saying like, it's just easier to freeze eggs. It's easier to like...
Yeah, in vitro is not such a huge pain in the ass. It's not expensive and painful. Just imagine a hypothetical world where Jeannie came and they said, you know what? From 22 to 52, everyone's going to have the same chance of having smart, healthy babies. Miscarriage rates will be the same. Your fertility will be identical. We're just going to it'll just be a flat line, and then at 52, it'll go to zero. I think you'd see an even bigger push towards later marriages, later kids. I think the biological clock is one of the biggest reasons that it hasn't gone further, because life expectancies have gone further. You know what I mean? And I think financial independence has gone further away with student loans and stuff. I think the idea of what being an adult was and all the phases that you hit, they've all gotten pushed back further in terms of when you're financially independent and when you're all that stuff. And so, I think as soon as they figure out how to make having kids a non-issue in your 40s, you're going to see the average age for marriage and kids get pushed back another decade.
Yep. Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.